Okay, welcome back, everyone. On this third day of Shloishes Yemei Agbala, and again, we could really wish everybody a good and Erev Yom Tiv as we get ready for Shavuos, and we're sponsored by A.B. Spry and by Michal Abram Chavin. And again, remember that we will be finishing this Masechta in 15 blot, in 15 days. We are looking for sponsors for Bava Basra. Bava Basra, oh, what a Masechta. Largest Masechta in Shas, 162 blot. And it's a real catch. And it costs the same amount to sponsor Bava Basra as it does Masechtas Megillah. So it is a big bargain. And we are holding by the new Mishnah, Hamakabel Soda Mechaveiroi. If, let's say, let's pick somebody, Mark leases the field for me. Vihi Beis HaShlochin. And it happens to be a field that needs irrigation. Or it has a field with trees in it. Yovei Shama'ayin, if the well dries up, the Niksas or Elon, and the tree is cut down, Ein Menakaloi Min Chikuroi. If, let's say, Mark made an arrangement with me, we don't deduct the arrangement. However, Im Amaloi, if Mark specified, he's a careful fellow, Mark, Im Amalai, he's been burnt too many times. So Im Amalai, if he said, Chakor li, lease to me, stay beis hashalchen zu, this irrigated field. So he specifies he's only doing it because it's an irrigated field. Or stay beis ilan zeh, he wants it because it has a very profitable tree besides being a grain field. Then Yovish Ma'ayim and Nixas Ilan, then if the well dries up or the tree gets cut down, Menakaloi Min Chikurai, then he could deduct from the arrangement. Now Mark's smiling. So the Gemara says, Hey Chidami, Ilema di Yovesh Nara Rabba, if the entire water source of the whole area dries up. You see, the reason why, if it's the well that dries up, Mark can't say anything, because I could say to Mark, Mazlach Garam, your mazel caused it. But if it's a Makas Medina, if the entire region has a water shortage, there wasn't rain for the whole year, and the major river dried up, why can't he deduct from the rate? I can't say Mazloch Gara. Namely Makas Medina. He should say it's a widespread Makkah, and therefore the property isn't worth the price. Amra Papa di Yovesh Narazuta. What happened is the small river dried up. Now, Taisa says it doesn't mean the river only of this field. Because if that would be the case, then I could tell him, Mazloch Garam, your mazel caused it, and we wouldn't need what the Gemara says. The Amalei, because I tell Mark, you could get it from a nearby water source with a bucket. Now, the reason why I have to say that, Taisva says, why don't I just say Mazloch Garam, your mazel caused it? Because it's talking about where the water source affected the 10 fields, so I can't say Mazloch Garam. But I could tell him, so you'll have to walk a little bit and bring the water from a little bit, you'll have to take a little hike. It's good for your weight.
Isn't this person a regular artist? So it's both Mazel because they split it.
What?
They split it. Isn't he an artist, or is he?
Yeah, he is an artist. I'm talking about his share. I'm not talking about my share. I can't do anything about my share. My mazel is also garam. I'm going to lose it too. Amra Papa, Hani tarte masnisa kamaisa. These two first Mishnahs, as we said, and as Rabbi Kranz is alluding to, Mishkachas bein b'chakrenusa, bein b'kablanusa. It's found both by chakiris, a tenant farmer, which pays a fixed rate, 50 bushels, no matter how much it produces, or if it's a sharecropping arrangement. Mekan ve'elach, but we'll see future Mishnahs, the isak b'kablanusa, lesa b'chakrenusa. What's true by a tenant farmer is what's true by a sharecropper is not true by a tenant farmer. What's true by a tenant farmer, lesa b'kablanusa, is not by a sharecropper. We'll talk about that when we get to the Mishnah. Now, im amalei chakorli stay beis hashlochen zeh. If, however, Mark says, lease to me this irrigated field, then if it dries up, I have to deduct. Says the Gemara, V'amai, Leimalei, let me say to Mark, Shma ba'al me'emrei lach. I agreed to the name of the field. The name of the field is called the Beis HaShlachin. I didn't agree to any other specification. That's the name of the field. Miloi Tanya, haven't we learned in a Brisa? If I tell Dr. Block, base kur offer ani moichelach, I'm selling you a base kur of earth. Even though it has only the acreage of a half a kur, the deal goes through. Now, Dr. Block is hopping up and down. What do you mean? It's only half a kur. What do you mean? You said you're selling me a base kur. My property is known as Rabbi Weiss's base kur. It's enough if it's called a base kur. If it's called a base kur, I could say to Dr. Block, I told you I'm selling you the place that's called base kur. Similarly, I'm selling you a vineyard. Now, Dr. Block buys it and there's no vines. Even though there's no vines, he gave. This place was known as Rabbi Weiss's vineyard. That was the name of it. It's Martha's vineyard. There's no vines in Martha's vineyard, is there? Is there vines in Martha's vineyard? Anybody know? It's called Martha's vineyard. Doesn't have any vines. Now also likewise, pardes ani meichelach. If I say to Aaron, he's smirking. If I say to Aaron, pardes ani meichelach, I'm selling him an orchard. Now orchard usually means an orchard of pomegranates. Pardes rimonim. So Aaron is thinking, those pomegranates, they're going to be so delicious. Even if it doesn't have pomegranates, it's his. He can't make any claims. I only sold him a name. As long as it's known as Rabbi Weiss's orchard. I could tell him, I just sold you the name by what it goes by. So here too, Mark told me he's renting from me a Beis HaShlachin. It's just a place that's called Beis HaShlachin. So Shmuel says a big difference. If I tell Mark I'm selling you a Beis Kur, I could say I meant a place that's called Beis Kur. But if Mark tells me he's renting for me a Beis HaShlachin, he meant that it has irrigation. One is where the landowner is saying it to the one who's leasing it. One is where the one who's leasing is saying it. If the landowner is saying it, Shma B'alma, he's just alluding to the name that it's called by. Shma B'alma Amalei Chayker L'machber. But if Mark says, I want an irrigated field, or I want a field with a tree, then Kpeda, and that you sure could bet your bottom dollar that he means that he wants it irrigated, he wants it a place with a tree. Ravina says a different answer. Ravina says over here, Mark says, or I say, it could be even the landowner, I say that I'm selling you Beis Hashlochin Zeh. Since I say Zeh, I don't have to identify it by name, because I'm standing in it. So it's enough to say this field. The fact that I say Beis Hashlochin means I'm guaranteeing you that it has a well. Because it can't say I'm telling you the name. I don't have to say the name because I said Zeh. And that's what the Gemara answers. Both is talking about where I told Mark. But Medikama Zeh, since in our Mishnah I said this one, once I say this one, I don't have to identify by the name. Michlad the Gavaskin, I'm standing inside it. So then Beis Hashlochin Lamalei, why do I need to say the name? I'm saying this field. Then the Kamalei Beis Hashlochin Kedekay Ma'ashna, then I'm guaranteeing him that it has a well the way it is now. If the well dries up, then he could claim a reduction. Now, new Mishnah, and it's good to say, as we're heading into Matan Torah, it's good to get into the habit to learn Torah Lishma. We're doing it to be Mekayim the mitzvah v'dibarta bam, la'asais nachas ruach liyotzreinu, to give nachas ruach to our Creator. The smell of flowers permeates the room. Yeah, we're lucky to have rich. Hamakabel sada mechaveiroi. If let's say Mark leased the property, vihovira, and he left it fallow. In other words, he sat on his thumbs and he didn't do his job. Now I'm supposed to get a percentage. So what happens? There's nothing here to take a percentage from. We evaluate how much the field was supposed to make. So let's say the field was supposed to produce 1,000 bushels, and the arrangement was that I was going to get 50%. He has to give me v'noisloi, and he has to give me 500 bushels. Shekak koisevloi, for so is the arrangement. Im ovir, if I'm a sluggard, right? Mi'im over, if I leave it fallow, v'lo avid, and I don't produce a crop, ashalem b'meitfa, I'll pay you from the best of my property. Now over here, as the Gemara says, this Mishnah only works by a sharecropping arrangement. A kablanis, by a chakurnusa, there would be no reason to evaluate because he made up he's going to give me 500 bushels for the chakiris. We don't have to make any evaluation. He just has to give me the arrangement. Now, we might think that we only read the fine print if it's the words of the Chachamim. But the Gemara now tells us even the words of the fine print of businessmen, of commoners, are taken to be what they convey. Rameir Yadirish Lashon Hedyot. Rameir would expound on the fine print of commoners. The Tanya, Rameir Aimer, Im Oiver V'loy Avid, if I leave it fallow and I don't do, Ashalem B'meitfa, I'll pay from the best. So that's what we said. From there we see that we evaluate how much we evaluate Now, Rabbi Yehuda Yadayrish Lashon Hadya. Rabbi Yehuda also expounded on the fine print. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Adam Mevi Carbon Asher Al Ishtai. The rule is that there's some karbanas that fluctuate depending on the wealth of the one that has to bring it. For example, the carbon of a woman that gives birth, or the carbon of a Metzia, of a biblical leper. Now, the husband accepts upon himself to bring the karbanis of his wife. So we might think he brings the karbanis of his wife, but since he'll say, well, my wife is penniless, she doesn't have any money of her own, so I could bring a karbanani. Kamash Milan, that since it's his responsibility to bring it, and he has assets, he has to bring a carbon of an asher. Maybe carbon asher al ishtai. He brings a carbon of a wealthy person for his wife. V'chein kol carbon v'carbon she chayeves, or any other carbon she's responsible for. Not a voluntary offering like a shlamim or a taida, but an obligatory offering. Let's say she's mechal Shabbos b'shaygeg. He has to bring a chatas for her. He has to bring her an asham, a guilt offering for her. Shekak kaisav law, so he writes in the ksuva, achrayis de islach, the responsibilities that you have, alai, fall on me, even mikadmos dina, even from before I married you. Hilazaken ayadarish lashon hadyan. Hilazaken expounded the fine print of a commoner. The Tanya Anshe Alexandria, the people of Alexandria would betroth their wives, and then there was hanky-panky. Ubishas knisas and l'chuppah, before they took them and consummated the marriage, bon acherim, others would come, v'chayt v'noisamayan, and snatch them and sleep with them. Now, when they impregnate these women, they wanted to declare the children mamzerim. They wanted to declare the children mamzerim because they were already married women from the time of betrothal, and since they snatched them after the kedushin, so that's adultery. However, Hillel HaZaken found a loophole. Amalem Hillel HaZaken hivuli ksuvas imchem. Bring me the ksuva of your mothers. Hivuli ksuvas imam. And they found it written when you enter the chuppah with me, havilila into. You should, when you enter the chuppah, you should be for me a wife. So Hillel says that was a conditional kedushin, that they were mekadosh them on the condition that they take them to the chuppah. Since they never took them to the chuppah because they were snatched before the chuppah, so that voids the kedushin. Since it voids the kedushin, then the children are not mamzerim. They brought the ksuva of the mother. When I take you to the chuppah, you should be my wife. So that means they're making the kedushin conditional if they go to the chuppah. And since they never took them to the chuppah, it voids the kedushin of the first husband, and therefore the children from the second husbands are not mamzerim. V'lo b'nei mamzerim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Yadarshan Lashon Hedyet. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha also expounded fine print. The Tanya Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Aimer Hamalva es Chaverai. If I give Nachman alone, lo yamashkenenu yoyse mechayvai. I shouldn't take from him collateral worth more than the loan. So if I give him $5,000, I shouldn't take from him a $6,000 Rolex. Can only take from him a $5,000 Rolex. Shekak koisav light. This is what I write to Nachman. No, this is what Nachman writes to me. He writes me a document. Tashlumta de islach alai, the payment that you have a claim for on me, kol kibel dichi, is the value of the collateral that I gave you. So therefore, I'm guaranteed a collateral of $5,000. So you shouldn't give me something more than that, because if he gives me more than that, then I could claim from him a loan of $6,000. Now, the reason why Nachman writes me this is that if, it's only fictitious, but if he was poor, then there's a mitzvah to return. Let's say he needs the watch during the day. I have to return it to him during the day. Now let's take Nachman out of the equation over here. Let's say I gave this loan to Chatzkel, and I returned it to him during the day, right? So, and in the night I take it back. Now normally, if Chatzkel dies, I can't collect the money except from real estate, because metaltei diyasmei loy mishtabdei. But if I have the collateral, I could collect the collateral because now I have the document. So the Gemara says, time of the kasav lehachi, it's only because I have the document. If I didn't have a document like Kanya, I wouldn't be able to claim it back from the orphans. If I took the watch from Chatzkel, and I returned it for him during the day, I could take it back from the children. So even though normally but I could take back the collateral. So why do I need the document? Says the Gemara, as we turn to Kuf Dalin Amid Beis, says the Gemara, Ahani ksiva legeroin. It helps if the value goes down. So if the value of the watch goes down, so I could now collect, in the event that the mashkin goes down, I could collect from even movables up to the value of what it says in the shtar. Rabbi Yaisi also had a darish lashon head. Rabbi Yaisi also darshan fine print. The Tanya Rabbi Yaisi Aimer makom shenagu lasais ksuva milva. Now, if you remember, the last time we learned this, we learned it not so long ago in the Mishnah Yaimis, but we also learned it very recently in the Chak. If you remember, the custom was in some places that when a father-in-law gave a dowry, they doubled the amount of the dowry in the ksuva, so that it should look like the bride is getting a lot for the covet of the bride. So if, let's say, the father promised a dowry of 1,000, they put down 2,000. Some places they didn't do that. Some places they wrote the amount. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yaisi Darish Lashon Hedyet, the Tanya Rabbi Yaisi Aimer, Mokum Shenas Nagu Lasais Ksuva Milve. In other words, they made it like a loan. They put in it the amount that the father-in-law promised. Goiva Milve. So then the din is that he could collect from the father-in-law the amount of 1,000. Lichpel, if the custom was to double the dowry, then goiva machza, he could collect half. Narbaloi gavu tilsa. And Narbaloi says the minig in their place was to triple it. So then he collected a third. Meremer magvei nami shvacha. Meremer, even in a place where they doubled the amount, collected double from the shver. So the Gemara says, why? If they doubled the goiva mechzi, you collect half. Says the Gemara, like kasha the cunning mine. If they made a kinyan suder, so then he got to collect the full amount. If they didn't make a kinyan suder, then if they double it, he collects half. Ravina mishabeach v'ksiv lebrate. Ravina wanted it to look glorious, so he doubled it for his daughter. Amrulay, then they said, Nikna mine demar, let's make a kinyan. They're playing, well, they were a wise guy. Amalu, I mikbel, I mikbel. No. If we're going to make a kinyan, I'm not doubling it. I mikbel, if we double it, then like miknei, then I'm not making a kinyan, because then if I make a kinyan, you get to take the literal double. Now, what about an ambiguity? This is interesting. How Gavra, the Amalahu, a father-in-law said, Havalo arba mea zuze lebrate biksuvasa. Give 400 zuz to my daughter in the ksuva. So the question is, did he mean write 800, that he's giving 400, or does he mean write 400 and he's giving 200? Shalach Rav Achabraid Rav Avila coming to Rav Ashi. Do we say that he meant arba mea, the inun tamne mea, which is 800 to write in the ksuva? Or arba mea zuze, he was saying write in the ksuva 400, and he's promising din and masin, he's promising 200. So Amar Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi says a clever thing. Chazinan. I amal havulei arba mea zuze. If he says to her, give her 400. So I'm sorry, I lost the place over here. It's here. 1 second. Okay, so Amar Rav Ashi, there's two versions here. Amar Rav Ashi, Chazinan. I Amar Havula, if he said give her, so if he said give her 400, so give her, that's 400, actually a gift of 400, which should be doubled to 800 in the ksuva. Arba mezuzin the inun tamnei ma. If he says write for her 400, write for her, that means it's only written 400 when we double it, and he only meant to give it 200. Then arba me'azuzay din and masa. Right? So it depends if he said give it to her, or he said write it to her. If he said give it to her, so he said give her 400, and then you write in the ksuva 800. If he said write it for her is 400, then that means we already doubled it, and then she gets 200. That's the first version. There's another version, Ikadamre, another version, Amar Rav Ashi, Chazinan, I Amalik Suvasa, if he said for her ksuva, so for her ksuva is not what's written in the ksuva. Lik Suvasa for her ksuva, that means 400, which would be 800 in the ksuva. Abba Mezuze, Dimnan Tame Meya. The Yomra big Suvasa in the Ksuva, so it says write 400 in the Ksuva, which is actual 200. However, Lohi. V'loishna dama lik Suvasa, v'loishna dama big Suvasa. Once he says he's referring to the Ksuva, so then that means when it's doubled. So it's 400. When it's doubled, he's only giving her 200. Abba me'ezuze de in and masan. Until he tells, give her 400. Give her 400 is 400, which is 800 in the ksuv. Now, Ahu Gavra. Now we know if it says Ahu Gavra, that's Mark, when Marshall is not here. Okay, I know Eddie is jealous. You know what? I realize that Eddie has traveled and escaped to all different places. You're in New Orleans now, right? Yeah, I knew that. You see, don't you see on his face, he has written all over him Sin City. Who goes to Sin City for Kabbalah Satira? I don't know. I don't know. It's a stira. It's a contradiction. It's like having Kabbalah Satira in Sdoim. But Eddie is probably by a Chabad house. You are? Something like it.
Yeah, I'm going to be by Chabad. There's two Chabads here, actually. The Metairie and New Orleans.
You know, no, their Chabad will never be the same. Okay. Try not to steal the Sefer Torah, Eddie.
I know one thing. I'm not going to ask you for references.
I'll tell them, what name did he give you? Anyway, so Hahu Gavra de Kabel Ara Mechavre, Eddie leased a field for me. Omar, he said, Imavirnala, if I leave it fallow, because, I was very edgy about giving it to Eddie. So Eddie says, Imavirnala, if I leave it fallow, Yohivnalach alpha zuzay. I'll give you 1,000 zuz. That's a pretty nice, and he wrote it. It was power of attorney and everything. Shimon Klein looked it over. He said it's okay. It's. At the end, what happened was over Tilsa. He developed 2/3, and he left a third fallow. Now everybody here, all the Dayanim, Mumchim over here would say that he owes me $333.33 because he left a third fallow. So Imre Nardai, that's what they said in Nardai. Dinu diyav late tlasmo tlasanu tlaso tilsa. He should pay me 333.33. Rav Amarava says no. That's an asmachta. He never thought that he wouldn't do it. Remember we said that if somebody says an outrageous amount, it's not binding because he never thought that he wouldn't do it. Amarava asmachta, v'asmachta loikanya. So the Gemara says, yeah, but what did we have? We learned a lesson that if the guy, the sharecropper, leaves it fallow, then we evaluate how much it was produced and he has to pay me. Says the Gemara, if I leave it fallow and I don't work, Hashalim b'meitva. So the Gemara says, yeah, that's not a smachta, that's not a guzma. Hasam loigak hagazim. Hacha came in to come a milsi aserta, since he said such a outlandish amount, 1,000 zuz, that's an asmachta guzma ba'almahu de kikazim, and therefore it's not binding. Now, how Gavra, Mark, the Kara Kabal Ara was Shumshime. He leased the land to plant sesame. Now, sesame burns out my field more than grain. But it produces more money. So he arranged to plant sesame. Zorachite. But he disobeyed. This is Mark we're talking about. And he planted grain. But because Mark has schusim, of the chite kashumshime, the grain produced like the sesame. It produced as much as the crop would have been of sesame. So, Sava Rav Kahana Lameimer, Rav Kahana figured to say, Menachalei Kach Shadara. I should deduct from him, since I got the yield of the grain. I mean, the grain was a successful crop, and it produced enough, like it would have been sesame. So I should be able to. Mark should say, Rabbi Weiss, I saved your land from being drained. You should deduct that amount and give me extra. You should deduct what you take from me. So, Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana, Imre Inche, people say, Kocha Sha'ara, I'd rather have my land be drained, v'loy licha ishmara, and not take money away from me. So I don't agree to reduce what I get from him, because I say I don't want to end up with less of a yield. I'd rather have my land drained and not give up getting the amount of money that I expected to get. Now, what about this case? He accepted to plant sesame, Zorachite, but Mark planted wheat. But would you believe it that Mark has such a golden thumb of the chite tfeimin shemshmei? The wheat produces more than the sesame. So what happened was the sesame would have produced $1,000 crop. Normally wheat only produces 750. But this wheat crop produced 1250. Now, we were only expecting 1,000. So Mark said the 250 extra I want. Because you said I should plant sesame. I deviated, I planted wheat, and it made 250 more. That extra I want. Of the chite tfeimin shemshmei. So Sava Ravino Lamemer Yov Le Shivcha de Beni Beni, that Mark could claim the extra 250. Amalei Rav Achmed Difti Ravina Otuhu Ashbach. Did Mark only make the improvement? Araloy Ashbach. It grew from my land. So you're right, you're going to get part of the 250, but I'm also going to get part of the 250. Mark says, I planted. First of all, Mark, I'm not going to hire you again because you disobeyed me. And second of all, there's no reason why you should only get the benefit. It came from my land. If it wouldn't be for my land, you wouldn't get the benefit. So we have to split it. Now, of course, he gets of that extra whatever the sharecropper arrangement is, but he doesn't get all of it. Okay, here is where we're going to stop.